Let's make 1860s underwear for a 4-year-old. Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin. I'm a living historian who educates other living historians by teaching old-fashioned sewing skills and copying original garments. So, my husband works at a museum. He has asked me to do a display on children's wear and also women's wear, but I already have all that stuff. I have what I want to put on display for part of the children's wear. This is an original 1860s dress. It's beautifully braided. And there's a cat who's not supposed to be up here when I have originals on. And it has a matching sacque coat or a little coat with it. You are not allowed to be near this. That's going to have to go over here now because you're right here. And so when it's on the mannequin, it looks really sad because it's just it's droopy, the skirt just kind of hangs. It doesn't look like it would have looked when it was worn, right? And the reason for that is there are no proper undergarments. Proper undergarments make all the difference in women's wear and also in children's wear. So we're going to make a set of reproduction underwear for this original dress to go on display for a museum. So we're going to make a chemise, we're making drawers, we're making stays, a petticoat. I'm thinking maybe a hoop. I might be able to do 2 petticoats instead of a hoop. It's going to be 2 petticoats. Whether or not a hoop goes in between them, I think we're going to have to get some of them done, and then we'll figure that out. So we're going to start with doing the chemise, drawers, and petticoat, because those really don't need any fitting. We're going to come back, do the stays, and then at that point we're going to put it all on a new mannequin, and then we're going to see if I need to do the hoop or not. If I don't, great, we'll just move on to the second petticoat. If I do, great, we'll work on the hoop and then we'll work on the second petticoat. So this should be a lot of fun. It should be a lot of stuff to do because it's not just one thing. We're making an entire set of underwear. I measured the original. It's about a 21-inch waist. It looks like it would fit a 4-year-old, hitting just below the knee, which is typical for dresses of little girls of that age at this time period. So I bought a 4 to 5-year-old mannequin. It might be a little bit bigger. It'll fit the dress just fine. I think I'm going to make underwear for a 4-year-old. So the underwear might be a little bit stretched, but it will work. It'll be fine. And yeah, I got a lot of white cotton here, and that's what we're going to be using. So it looks like I'm going to have to convince this guy to get off my cutting zone, and then we can get started. Alright, I have just ironed my cotton, and my fabric I believe is 45 inches wide, but I can double check that very quickly. It's 43 inches wide. That's close enough. It's actually even better. So I'm going to use one single width of my fabric to make the chemise, because chemises are very gathered, which is good. You want that gathered, but you don't want it super, super full because then it gets kind of uncomfortable under stays and that sort of thing. So what I need for length is I have a lovely measurement chart online that gives children's body sizes from 6 months to 16 years. And it has a lot of the normal ones like bust and waist and hip and that sort of thing. But then it has like measurements that you don't usually think of that when you don't actually have the child in front of you that you're sewing for are very helpful. Like back neck to waist and then waist to hip or waist to knee. And that way you can kind of gauge or how long things need to be. I'm going to fold this actually again because I'm going to want kind of a straight panel here. So this will be my center front here. And this will be the sides. So the first thing I need is going to be the length. Now children's chemises don't go down to the knee or below like ladies' chemises do because children's dresses are so much shorter. So I find that children's chemises usually hit around hip length or a little bit below hip length. So according to my measurement chart, a 4-year-old or back neck to waist, waist to hip measurement together is about 15 inches. Now I want it to be a little bit below that hip, so I'm going to do 2 more inches. That's going to be 17 inches, and I have to think I want to add at least 2-inch seam allowance. So I'm going to cut mine 19 inches for this chemise. Cut it straight across. So that's going to be the whole length of my tiny little chemise. And the one thing my thing doesn't have is a good neck measurement, so I'm going to have to Google that. I'm pretty sure there's some probably government official that thinks there's this crazy lady in Texas who keeps Googling very weird things about young children, such as their neck circumference or a 2-year-old's inseam. But I swear, I'm just making clothes. So the armhole depth, that's going to be about 8 inches total, which means 4 inches on either side. And then I'm going to want a seam allowance. I'm going to do about 5 inches right here. So I can unfold this, and that's going to be my basic chemise shape. I can go ahead and cut up this fold because this won't be needed. And then to go ahead and figure out which one's going to be my front, which one's going to be my back, the front's going to have a little slit. Just like that. So that's my basic chemise shape here. So now I'm going to need to cut the sleeve, but to avoid fabric wastage, I'm going to go ahead and start the drawers. Same thing, I'm going to be using one length of panel for the drawers. So to get waist to knee, I would need about 11.5 inches. I do want it below the knee because I want the drawers to peek out like they often do. So I'm thinking 3 inches longer. So I need them 15 inches long when they're finished. I want to add 3 tucks, but I also want to add in some embroidery. It's a pretty little white work. That is about 3 inches. So if I did 3 1/2 inch tucks, that would take up that, and that. So I need to add 1.5 inches to my 15 inches that I wanted finished. So because I want 3 tucks, and I can do B1/2 inch tucks, and I have a 3-inch bit here, I really don't need to add anything for that. So that's still 15 inches. I'm going to cut it 16 because I will also, of course, need a seam allowance at the top. This is, I find, easier to draw out. So we'll do 17 inches. We'll also do it 20 from down here. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this in half. So I said I only needed them 17 inches, so I'm going to mark 17 up here. Alright, calves for 4-year-olds are about 7.5 inches. Let's go ahead and add about 3 inches for ease and, well, instead 4 inches. So either side of this is going to need, so that's 8 inches plus 4, that's about 12 inches. Half of that's going to be 6. Let's go ahead and do it 5.5 to make it a little less crazy. Go ahead and cut that. That's going to be my bottom, so I can go ahead and cut this all the way across. I'm just going to need to mark that 5.5 here. Go ahead and cut the top as well. So that is about 5.5 is the top right here. And then we're just going to meet it up a little bit. Just because back seems to be a little bit fuller than the fronts, but not by much. Here comes the cat. So now, of course, I have to figure out how much not the inseam, this is from the navel, which is the belly button, down to the center of the body if you're going underneath the child. I don't even know how to Google that without sounding like a predator. Would that be the crotch length? Okay, that was the right word. 19 inches looks like it's going to be, so about 18 inches. So front to back, that's about half that. We're going to say it's not quite 10. You know you're on my project, right? So it looks like we're going to be about 9-ish inches. Excuse me. So this is where this is going to get right here. Now the thigh, and we're just going to kind of connect it like that. Now the more you can make that straighter, the easier your tucks are going to be if you're tucking it. And hopefully if you have a help of yours, it's more helpful than mine is. So now we have 2 drawer legs. I was actually kind of hoping to cut my sleeves out of this. That is definitely not going to work. And then the one of these just needs to be cut straight. It's a little not straight, but that's okay. And then I need to cut up the front here. So we have 2 pieces. Those are a little bit wide for a 4-year-old, but drooms are meant to be roomy, so I think we're okay there. So we're going about a 20-inch waistband for these, which works out with my 45-inch or 43-inch wide fabric because I can cut both the first petticoat waistband and the drawers waistband on the same rip of fabric. So I'm going to rip this petticoat straight across. And I'm going to want a 1-inch waistband. So I'm going to cut it 3 inches because 1 inch on either side plus 1/2 inch on either side for seam allowance. Okay. So I needed about 21 inches because seam allowance. And I will be tying these shut only because kids grow. Alright, waistband. Before I cut chemise sleeves, I am going to cut a petticoat. The primary petticoat I want to be about 10 inches long. And do I want tucks? Do I want tucks? Do I want tucks? It's just a primary petticoat. So 10 inches plus a 2.5 inch hem plus a 1/2 inch at the top, 13 inches long. And it's a primary petticoat. I'm thinking just doing one width of fabric. Let's do the chemise sleeve, and then before I forget, we gotta do the sleeve neck or chemise neckband. So I want my finished sleeve to be about 4 inches, and that includes seam allowance. So it includes a 1/2 inch at the hem and a 1/2 inch at the top. Okay, which I can go ahead and use the rest of this for my band. We're about 23 inches. make it about 1 inch bigger. With seam allowances, I'm going to cut it 25 inches. We carry seam allowance, make it a little bit narrower than the dress. Alright, now we have all of our pieces, and we can start sewing. Alright, starting with the sewing, I just worked on the side seams first. I am using Amy's Wilcox & Gibbs. This is a later model from the late 19th century, but it's basically the same machine as an 1850s one. The only differences are superficial on the machine. It doesn't reflect the stitch itself. And then each of those seams are going to get felled. This is because you want these side seams, and anything that's going to be, especially on underwear, especially on children's underwear, to be very flat against the skin. That way it doesn't irritate the skin. And after the side seams get sewn on the drawers and also the chemise, the sleeves get sewn into the chemise. This also gets felled because, again, all seams are basically going to be felled or hemmed down in this thing. Also, I really appreciate the look of a nicely felled seam. It just looks so nice. And you can do the felling by machine. If you do the stitching by machine, you can do the felling itself by hand. That's fine too. I just thought it was going to be faster by machine. And then on the drawers, there's a side opening on either side that gets hemmed as well. And then I get to work on the drawers at the very hem. This is where I'm adding the white work bit. And that gets sewn into a tuck, essentially. That way I don't have to finish that seam later. And I'm showing the footage all at 4 times the speed, so it looks like I'm going fast. Yes, it's going very fast. And after that, the drawers get their tucks. I'm doing 3 1/2 inch tucks for each leg of the drawers. And then that front slit on the chemise gets seamed down as well. These are going to get tucks put in later, but I prefer to do that by hand instead of by machine. The chemise sleeves and the hem get finished off with a little bit of a hem, about a 1/2 inch hem, not very big at all. And that essentially finishes most of the machine work except for the neckband and the waistbands, which I do have to do the gathering by hand first before I can do that by machine. And then once I gather the drawers, I'm able to sew them to the waistband. Same with the chemise. Once it's gathered, I can sew it to the neckband. And then I work on the petticoat, which is going to get stitched at the back. Of course, there is an opening in the back, so I make sure to leave that open. It's a selvage edge, though, so I don't have to finish it or fell it. And then the petticoat is hemmed. This took forever. I know it was only 43 inches of hemming, but it seemed like it took forever. This is actually what motivated me, because the reason we're not working on the treadle machine, I have an exact machine of this in treadle form, but this particular seam motivated me to, I had the treadle machine for the rest of the time. And then the petticoat and the drawers and also the chemise are going to get a little tuck put in wherever there's an opening. And this just makes it to where you don't see a gap in between where the slit is. You don't want to see a gap, even if it is underwear. You want the coverage there. And you can absolutely do this by machine. I just prefer to do it by hand. I think it looks and lays better, but that's just a personal preference. And then the petticoat gets gathered at the top. Again, this has to be done by hand, as there are no machines that do gathering or a basting stitch whatsoever in the 1860s, especially not the machines I'm using today, which are the Wilcox & Gibbs, which give a chain stitch. There is no bobbin thread, it's a single thread. There's no way to pull on it. If you pull on it, you break the thread, essentially. So there is no way to do a larger stitch that would gather at all with those particular machines anyway. I do have modern machines, and I could have gathered this by machine. However, I do find that hand gathering lays differently than machine gathering, and it is noticeable to me. So I'm going to do this the right period way, particularly because this is going to be used not only for a display piece at the museum, but later on it will be used for living history. And then I'm going to cut off the stays because I forgot to earlier. This is very simple. They're about 7 inches long, the same length as the waist. And then I just cut out a little armhole, and that is basically what the stays are. They're very simple to make for children. I did cut 2 layers, and this is because I'm going to be stitching cording channels in between these 2 layers, which is the last thing I get to do with this hand crank machine. I'm doing the channels in rows of 3 to 4. I'm doing some down the center, some down the side, some in the back, and then some kind of in between that are a little bit curved, just to give it a little central detail. There are lots of ways you can do cording.
You don't even have to cord the stays. You can just leave them plain. Either way is perfectly fine. I find cording a little bit more common, and I think the cording is pretty, so I prefer to do them with the cording. And then it's a ton of handwork. So starting with the waistbands, both with the chemise and the drawers, and also the petticoat. So the neckband and chemise gets hemmed down. So do both sides of the drawers. So the drawers are on two separate waistbands. There's a front waistband and a back waistband. And then the petticoat also has a band to put on. And then for closures, the drawers get buttonholes, but the petticoats get ties and then also buttonholes, which is what I'm sewing here. So the ties go in the center back. The drawers don't get them because there is no center back closure for the drawers. The drawers open up the sides. But the drawers and the petticoats do both get 3 buttonholes put on, one in the center front and then one at each of the sides. And then there is the cording to do. This is actually my favorite part of the project. I love to cord things. I don't know what it is. It's just I'm a huge fan of cording. I think it looks amazing. I love doing it. Especially love it when the cording channels get to be done by machine and I don't have to hand sew those. But I absolutely do love the process of cording things. I tend to do 2 layers of cording, so 2 thicknesses of yarn in a single cording channel because I think it looks better and it just pops a little bit more. But you can absolutely do 1. I'm using sugar and cream or peaches and cream cotton yarn in white. The next step on the stays is binding them, so that it's going to be at the top and also at the bottom. It's just a whip stitch using a little bit of cotton twill tape. I'm using 1-inch cotton twill tape, and I just whip it onto the front, fold the twill edge over the raw edge, and whip it down on the other side as well, and that gives me a nice finished edge. I'll also do this at the top, and then while I'm at the top, I'm going to use that twill tape to also make the shoulder straps for the stay. So it's like a 2-in-1 deal. And then the stays get ties added. So this is going to go at the top, bottom, and middle at both sides of the center back. And this is just how we close the stays. I'm using 1/8 inch twill tape for all of the projects today. That and 1/16 inch is going to be the most common size of twill tapes for ties in this era. And then come the buttons. So there are 2 rows of buttons. So there'll be a button on the very bottom and the button right above it. And these are going to go on the center front and also 1 on each side. And the reason we're doing 2 rows is that for potty purposes, you definitely need to have the drawers on a bottom button because then you don't have to get completely undressed to be able to go to the bathroom. So let's say we only had 1 layer of buttons. That means your drawers have to go on first, and then your petticoat and your hoop and your other petticoat, and then your dress. Well, to take off the drawers to go to the bathroom, because remember, our drawers are closed crotch for little girls in this time period, because girls are expected to be children. They're expected to run around, play, do little children things. And the only underwear is split crotch. That's not very modest, and people are going to see things that you probably don't want people seeing on your child. But to potty, you would have to take off the hoop, you'd have to take off both petticoats, and then the drawers to be able to potty, and that's just a lot of work for little girls, especially little ones who may not be fully potty trained and may not be able to hold it in very much. So definitely the 2 layers of buttons is the best way to go. So the drawers go on the bottom one and the petticoats can go on the top.
Well, the mannequin arrived. So I guess I can put this thing together now that we have the basics done, because I'm going to need all of that on to be able to measure for this hoop. At this point in my career, I put together lots of these things. Never one this small though. I kind of do wish they came in black or like a stain, like a darker stain, only because that's what my other mannequins are, and I'd like for them to match, but this is okay. Glad to clarify that. Cool. Fun. Okay, let's put clothes on this thing. Drawers are not going to be fun. Okay. Well, actually stays first. Yep. But that does look good. Okay. Now we can put in drawers. Let's go ahead and do the front button. And there are no buttons in the back. So we want to make sure that the child can technically do themselves for their own potty purposes at this age. And it's hard to reach back there. So only buttons at the sides and the center front. And the center front one you can technically omit. It's just sometimes it falls down a little bit. So I find it's a little bit better for wear if you do it this way. So now we have this. Looks like we're good. Nice and poofy. Let's do a petticoat. Put the original over it. I'm going to see whether I want to do the whole hoop thing or if another petticoat will suffice. I want more boof. I love that you can see the little pantalettes underneath. It's so cute. It's exactly what we were going for. We see the pantalettes a little bit more if I got a small hoop in there. Hoop. Hoop needs to be a little bit longer than this, but not by much. Well, where did I put that tape measure? So this, I believe, is a 10-inch skirt. Yep. This one's 14. I want the final petticoat to be 13, 12 and a half inches. So I'm thinking an 11-inch hoop would be great. And circumference. Never made a kid's hoop before. This is interesting. All right. So if I did like a, how big is this here? If I made it a little bit bigger. So if I did a 45-inch hoop, is that too much? I think a 45-inch wide hoop is going to be good for her frame. And I said 11 inches long. And I think we're just going to take this and start measuring. I find it easier to do hoops on the mannequins. It's one of the reasons we had to get this thing in. So I'll just like do a waist tape, I'll pin it on, and I'll start pinning strips. And I'll mark where I want the channels. We'll put the channels in, we put the wire in. There shouldn't be a lot of shaping with this one. How many tapes there need to be and all that. We'll just kind of gauge it from there. But I think we can go back to the living room for that part. And then once I get that done, we can put together a petticoat that goes over top. And I think that was going to be 2 panels of fabric. Like this was 1 panel of fabric. I think that was going to be 2 panels. It's looking good. I'm happy with that so far.
And then for the crinoline, the very first step is to measure for the waistband, which I just took the mannequin and I measured across the waist. And I'm not adding there to be any ties for this because I'm going to do a eyelet hole for the closure, which is the easiest way to do this. And then for the actual hoop itself, I measured the bottom rung at 45 inches and attached it. And then I did the top rung just a little bit more than her hip measurement or wherever that petticoat was, so it's not bunching at the top. And then I started at the bottom and I just sat there with the hoop and I pushed it in and out of the rungs until it looked right, and that's where I cut it. So I did very little math with this. There probably is a fantastic formula out there that would have helped with this, but I just managed it this way and somehow it worked out. So I guess this is fine. And then the last step is, of course, to add the little grommets there, one on either side. I am using a pencil to mark that hole and to make it bigger because I couldn't figure out where my awl went to, and that was the easiest thing I had. Twill tape pushes apart pretty easily, so it was easy to use the pencil. And then just use my grommet setter, and I have one on either side. This is also going to make it adjustable. And then I'm going to cut the upper petticoat. I'm cutting 2 panels that are going to be finished about 13 inches long, and I did add enough for a good 1.5 inch tuck in that, and also for a nice 2-inch hem because I like long hems. And this is where I got that sewing machine working because there was no way I was sewing this giant thing with the hand crank. It would have taken forever and my hand gets crampy. So I definitely wanted the treadle for this. I got her working, sewing the panels together, which of course isn't the hard part. The hard part, or not really hard, the long part of this is going to be doing the hemming and also making that tuck because that can be a lot of work. It can be very time consuming when you're doing it by hand crank. The treadle goes a lot faster than the hand crank, so this is just a lot faster way of doing it. And of course the top also gets hemmed down just like we've done before. I will make that tuck later on whenever I do the hand gathering, which again I still have to do the hand gathering for this as well. And then was back to handwork. So the tuck on the center back just to make sure that nothing's showing underneath. And then all that hand gathering, again, before I get to go back to the machine and put on that waistband, just as we've done before. And then for the very last step, I get to put on the waistband. First, here are the kittens. They are super adorable and they love hanging out and helping me sew, which is fun. They're finally at the stage where they're wanting to come out and hang out with me, which is both awesome and also I don't get as much work done, so there's a downside to that. But the waistband gets whipped on, and then there's ties in the back. I found I didn't have to put the buttonholes on this one, only because the petticoat and the hoop gives it enough of a hip to where this doesn't fall down. So I didn't have to do the buttonholes, which make me happy because I don't like doing buttonholes. And after putting ties in, that completes this project.
Alright, so here's where we left off. Here's the petticoat we just made. Let's go ahead and put this on her so we can put the dress on and see what the whole thing looks like. Much fuller. It's like a little princess. It's adorable. So I did weigh all this because I know somebody's going to be interested in like, oh my gosh, that poor little girl. So let me get my measurements. So I measured the dress itself at 7.2 ounces. I measured the sacque coat or the little jacket as 2.79 ounces. The chemise drawers that stays together weighed 5.54 ounces. And then the skirts that include this petticoat, the other petticoat, and the hoop was 8.61 ounces. Let me add all that up. So that's 24.14 ounces. That is 1.5 pounds. That is like nothing. And a lot of that is the dress weight itself. And that is partially due to the fiber it is, and it's partially due to the amount of trim that's on it. The trim can add up quite a bit. It looks like it's small and not very heavy, but when you have 50 yards of it or 100 yards of it, it does kind of add up a little bit. But altogether, 1.5 pounds, that's not bad. And honestly, the thing that people are going to freak out the most, the stays and the hoops, are actually the least. They weigh the least. That hoop skirt weighs, I should have weighed it on its own, but it weighs like nothing. But let's go ahead and put on the dress. And this is my heaviest child's dress. I have some that weigh, I haven't weighed them, but it's the sheer cotton, and it's about the same size. It weighs nothing in the back, but it's also going to be covered by the sacque. So I'm going to leave that. But I am going to fluff out the little skirt just a little bit. See, isn't that cute? Look at that. I don't know, you can see the pantalettes just a little bit. It's exactly how you should see them. Looks much better. Underpinnings make all the difference. Let's put her coat on her, which I'm not entirely sure I'm going to put on display because we're missing a good bit of the bodice and like the shaping when you put the coat on, because sacque coats of the period, as you can see, have like no shaping to them. Again, that's just not the most flattering. Also, this side of the braiding isn't doing so well. But either way, that is absolutely precious. I'm very happy with this. This is cute. So she's under full underpinnings. That's likely how this dress would have been worn. Maybe without the hoop, but it's 1860, so there probably would be a hoop. Kids are put into hoops like by the time they were walking. If you could walk steadily enough to where you weren't constantly falling over, hoops were the fashion, and we don't get to say anything because I know people my age who put their kids into adult looking clothing, so we don't get to say anything about this. This is just another way of, oh my gosh, it's so cute, it's like a little mini adult, which we do today. Fashion goes in and out between like kids be kids, which is what we had when I was little. Like our kids' clothes didn't look anything like adult clothing, and now we're kind of going back around to the other way, and then we'll flip-flop and we'll just keep going back and forth. It's a pendulum. It was like that back in the 1800s too. I mean, children's clothing was different than adult clothing. You get the short sleeves, you get the lower necklines and day wear, you get the shorter skirts. So there are definitely differences between adult and kids clothing, but even things like the hoops did come in with the kids as well. But also, it's just absolutely adorable. And it just moves so nicely. It's so cute. Okay. Alright, I think that's about it for this month. That was fun. Next month we get to work on the little boy who is around 3 years old, so he's about a year younger than her. And tomorrow I get to go to the museum and actually put these all on display, which I'm going to likely film that. And we'll put that like a little video of like, here's how you get a child dressed in the 1860s. But I think that's about it. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.